Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Heart of CX. I'm Joanna Palmer, and I'm really excited about today's episode because it's not just a single episode, but we'll call it a masterclass in personal customer experience. Over the course of the next 4 episodes, we'll be covering various different components of the personal customer experience, including today's episode, where we cover culture and why culture is key. And then we will be discussing executing on your digital transformation, delivering a personal customer experience, and the hows associated to delivering that experience. And then finally, we'll be wrapping it up with the emotional customer journey. So, Max, I'm going to kick it over to you. We've got some guests that will be here for the next several episodes. Do you want to go ahead and introduce them?
I would love to, and I'm really going to primarily let them introduce themselves, but we have Scott Schoenherr and Wesley Gryna from HCM, and in a moment I'll let them introduce themselves, but I want to talk a little about how we got here with these guys. We did a webinar with them a couple of months ago, and it was about personalization, and it was, 45 minutes or something. At the end of it, we all looked at each other and went, oh, there's so much more to talk about. What are we going to do? How do we get this out? We're not done. And thank God we have this podcast, because now we have a forum to get this out to the world, and we're really excited about it. So I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to go by who's left to right on my screen here. Wesley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? One of you guys talk a little bit about HCM, and then just Scott, why don't you take over as soon as Wesley's done and talk about yourself?
Thanks, Max. So Wesley Gryna, SVP of Product and Strategy at HCM. Been at HCM for about 4 years, and it's been quite an experience learning a little bit more about refinement in the customer experience, or the patient experience, as it relates to generally what we focus in on day in day. Scott and I work hand in hand with operations, technology, sales, marketing. We're kind of a cute couple in the office, in the sense that we're always on these Microsoft Teams meetings together, and we kind of try to facilitate a collaborative culture, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. And one of the things we believe, beyond culture being key, it defines an organization. And I think, Scott has kind of been the leader in doing that within our business.
Thanks, Wes. So Wes is, he kind of joked, he is kind of, I guess, like my work husband. I feel like a lot of the times we're very in tune with one another throughout the day and day to day at HCM. But my name's Scott Schoenherr. I'm the SVP of Operations and Technology here at HCM. I joined the company about a year and a half ago, I guess now, almost 2 years ago. And it's been a great experience. To Wesley's point, it's been an iterative approach. It's been this, we're always evolving. We're always looking how we get better. But for us, on how you get better, right? It always comes back to the culture of an organization, the mission, the values of an organization. Those are the foundational elements of any organization. And I feel like sometimes those things get kind of tossed around a little loosely in some organizations. It really takes a constant intentionality behind how do you want your culture to look and feel and be in your organization. And if you're a leader in an organization, you got to ask yourself, are you being intentional about this? Are you talking about your values, your culture in an organization on a daily basis to your teams and people? And then and that kind of like manifests itself into this, it becomes infectious almost, is how I would describe it in an organization. So as you can tell, I get really passionate about culture and just overall experiences. I wear a lot of different hats with Wesley at HCM. We do a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, culture, your mission, your values sets the foundation for all things that you're trying to accomplish in your organization. And we're excited to be here, and thanks for having us.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. So you guys have spent a lot of time building the culture at HCM. And by the way, it'd probably be good when I finish my question here, quickly, just what HCM is and does, just for background on that for people. But you've been very thoughtful about this and spent a lot of time on it. If I'm a CEO of a company and I want to start doing this, what's really the first step to kind of turn your organization into more of a customer-centric culture?
Yeah, Wes, do you want to talk a little bit about HCM, and then I'll take the second half of that question?
Sure. Yeah. So two-parter here. HCM. So Healthcare Claims Management is the full name. We go by HCM because we've expanded our business beyond purely healthcare. But generally speaking, we're kind of focused on engagement and customer service and patient experience within healthcare. So, I think healthcare bills are one of those things that a lot of people really don't like to deal with. We take the initiative to kind of drive a little bit more confidence in the billing process on behalf of our clients. So we work directly with large health systems, community health systems, labs, physician groups, all sorts of different entities within healthcare to drive engagement with their patients after services have been rendered. And more importantly, set expectations with patients and with revenue cycle and finance teams around what to expect in regards to how their patients are responding to the responsibility, which obviously is growing year over year over year. It's effectively tripled in the last 10-ish years. And, with that being said, HCM takes that as a core responsibility to ensure that we facilitate proper and kind of more or less quick payment from a patient responsibility, as well as work with our clients to properly bill their insurers. So I'm sure everybody's had some instances of confusion around insurance and how it relates to prescription or an inpatient stay or an outpatient visit. Those are some of the other solutions that HCM provides, a little bit more upstream and not so patient-centric.
Yeah, and we could do a whole nother hour on just billing problems I've had with healthcare personally. I'm sure we've all had many.
I think we've all had our fair share of billing snafus when it comes to healthcare. But Wes hit on a lot of things there in short order. And the second part of the question is, hey, if you're trying to build out this customer-centric personalization, organizational culture, where do you start, right? It honestly, it starts at the top in some aspects, but it can't just end at the top. It involves the entire organization. You need to be able to go to anybody in your organization at a given moment, and you need to ask them, hey, what is our brand? What do we value? What do we want to do to deliver great customer experiences? And everybody should have a very similar answer to that, because there should be alignment across your organization around how you do that. So it starts with a vision. It starts with a conversation. And what do you envision your company to be? What do you want that to look like? What do you want it to sound like? What do you want it to feel like? So Max, if you were to call about your healthcare bill, for example, what do you want that experience to look and sound and feel like, right? What would make Max feel great about that interaction that he just had? And, I use the word interaction there because I think sometimes when we get into contact centers and we talk about personalization, it is really easy for us to slip into what becomes very transactional on a day-to-day basis, right? Sounds very, dun to dun to dun to dun, kind of deal. And you're just like, all right, you sound like a robot on the other end. But on the flip side is if you can make that a true interaction, it's a consultative approach. It's coming from a genuine place of I'm here to help you. Let me help you. Let's work through whatever's going on. And how do we want that to look, feel, and sound? So for leaders in an organization, you have to first start to define what great is in your organization. What does great sound like? What does great look like? What is a great experience thing? And you need to define it. And you need to put it down on paper and whatnot. That is a great starting point. When you talk about a customer centric, thing, what does that look like? And then you have to ask yourself some honest questions. And you got to probably, humble yourselves a little bit if you're doing this, and ask yourself some tough questions. Do we have the right culture in place to support this vision, this what we think great looks like? Is it really here? Do our values as a business align with what we think is great here? And be honest with yourself in those conversations. Because if there's misalignment from a cultural standpoint or from a value standpoint, or even what your company's mission is, and it doesn't support the customer or in our world, the patients, right? You're never going to get there. You will always find yourself in this situation. In my experience, is like half the organization's really trying. So you got like your contact center managers right out there trying to do great customer service, but then you have this whole other part of your organization that's not aligned with that vision. And that feeds and bleeds into parts of your contact center then that ultimately affects their ability to deliver consistent, great, phenomenal, personalized customer interactions and services. So, that's kind of how we view the world at HCM. That's how Wesley and I have taken that approach, is that, we want to move away from transactional conversations to more interactional conversations. And then what's the expectation, right? What do people expect from us, and are we able to deliver that? And again, all of it at the end of the day comes back and ties back to the culture of your organization supports these initiatives.
So you've got to a point where you have a vision. You and Wesley you've got 100 napkins and you got all the right things there, and you've gone from napkins to whatever a format that's shareable. How do you roll that out to the company? How do you execute on that and make that actually happen?
Yeah. Wesley, I don't want to do all the talking. If you want to jump in on a piece of that,
I think rolling anything out, especially when you talk about culture, it boils down to the individuals and the different dynamics you have maybe across teams. So it's easy to ask. Somebody has a lot of autonomy in their day to embody culture, because within a contact center, if you are part of one of our frontline teams, or any frontline team for that matter, it can be a really narrow scope that you're asking someone to work with them. So I think part of what Scott and the team have done is kind of expand that and create a little bit more collaboration. And this isn't like, in between engagements with a patient or whomever, I can chat with the person next to me. It's collectively bringing people together periodically throughout the week and allowing people to have more of a voice around what's going on, what they like, what they don't like, but not just always making it about like maybe one of our frontline teams. We bring in other stakeholders within the organization. And, I think what that ends up facilitating is a greater team mentality. And when you look at any professional sports team, when they go to celebrate, a success, or, not necessarily celebrate a failure, but even the players that maybe don't partake in every single game, maybe they're not as critical, they cherish the wins just as much as, a star player. And so that's what we're hoping to do, is make everybody, drive a little bit more of inclusiveness, make everyone feel that there's a bigger picture here and they're part of it. And that's why we have values. That's why we keep bringing them up. And that's why we try, methodically to live by them. And when we talk about what we ask our frontline teams to do, values are really important, because we go from talking to someone who, might have ongoing, cancer treatment, to someone who literally just popped into their primary care physician for a general, annual checkup. Those conversations are very, very different. And in order to have consistency there, the whole culture is key theme of this podcast, that pretty much solidifies like why we're here and then what we do as a business every day.
That's got to put a lot of stress on you guys to be consistent and to, because you communicate things formally, but then there's so much. Joanna and I just did a podcast with a man named Daniel Ord, and he talked a lot about companies where management was pushing something, but then the managers were in their actions communicating something different. So how do you kind of keep on top of that and make sure that everything is aligned and going forward?
You have to stay involved. I'll just tell you,
Yeah.
my approach, my personal approach and my position is, if our service that we're providing, that's our product. Like, that's what we do, right? I mean, that is our business at the end of the day. And so you have to be involved, and you have to lead by some level of example. And so when we talk about do we talk about our culture and our values and our mission daily with our staff? Well, I'm going to go back to that, because we do. You have to be involved. You have to get people not just talking about it, but you have to get people to believe in it, right? And once people believe in these things, and they genuinely think to themselves, we are making a difference. We are difference makers. We are able to facilitate a nice change, and we are able to facilitate great customer service, and we are affecting people's lives and what their interactions are with us and how we're able to benefit their lives. And you get people to believe all these things, then it's all of a sudden now it becomes not necessarily are we doing it, is how can we do that next thing? How can we improve upon this? You got to build foundational elements, and that's why the culture piece is so important, because myself, Wesley, everybody involved has to be singing the same tune about rowing this boat in the same direction every single day consistently. Going back to your comments, Max, right? You had one half of the organization doing one thing and the other half saying another thing. That alone drives misalignment. So you have to put a framework in place. You have to have some guiding principles almost about how you want to approach this customer-centric service in your organization. And once you have those guiding principles in place of what does great even sound like? What do we want great to be like? What are the components of great for your organization? For us, we define those. We know what we want that to sound like. We know how empathy should sound like. We know what active engagement and active listening should feel and look like in our organization. We understand the technical aspects of what we need to do in our organization that ultimately drives good outcomes for how we handle patient accounts and things along those lines. So you start laying out all the different components to what great is for your organization. That's a good framework piece to start with, right? And then you have all these you have the cultural piece that helps lift up that framework, right? It comes behind it, it supports it, it elevates what the great is in your organization, because you have a culture that can help that you're building on top of, essentially, at the end of the day. So these are the approaches and kind of the philosophies that we took at HCM. And then once you get there, you start getting momentum, and don't lose that momentum when you get in your organization. But you got to be involved. To go back to the full circle, this, Max, right? How do you keep it? Everybody's got to be involved, and they have to be in it to win it is maybe a way to think of it at the end of the day. So,
Dan, what does the world look like without this sort of framework?
Misalignment, a lot of misalignment, in my opinion. You're gonna have a different, inconsistent experience in your organization at the end of the day, in my opinion. So you will have, if you have auditors in your organization that audit phone calls, right, from a quality perspective in your organization, if you don't have that, you're probably looking at your quality department, and you're probably saying, hey, we got to train better. We got to coach better. We got to do better. Why are our scores all over the map, right? We got people scoring high. We got people scoring low. We got people in the middle. We got all this stuff going on. And I think you got to take your step back at that moment. You got to ask yourself, okay, we got probably a couple layers deeper here we need to go in our organization to really, like, let's take a step back. Let's really reevaluate what we're doing and how we're doing it, what we want it to be, and then put all the pieces on top of it after you define it. Lack of definement, ultimately, when you don't have things defined and you don't have the what the great looks and sounds like and needs to be from a customer centric standpoint, then how do you build it? How do you support it? That's really hard to do when you don't define something ahead of time.
You guys are at the top in your organization. A lot of people in our audience are going to be more a director of a contact center. They don't get to define the company culture. What if I'm listening to this going, short of quitting and going to work for you, what could someone do to kind of turn things around at their company if they're they're running it? What could I do at that level to help if I'm not getting that sort of guidance from above?
Well, it starts with a conversation. So I believe in something called high trust teams. So high trust teams is this ability for us to, no matter where you're at in the organization, right, that there is a layer of trust involved in kind of that bottom layer of a pyramid, right? That there's this trust that's inherent in things that I'm going to be bold and I'm going to step up and I'm going to call it out, right? And we're going to have and call different stakeholders to the table. Wes talked a lot about collaboration early on. That's why the collaboration piece is so important, because in your culture and in your organization, if you find that your organization is siloed and there's these people that aren't talking to what they're not, there's not this cross-functional component to your organization, right? Shoot up a flare, send a lifeboat out, go try to start a conversation. Start small, right? Maybe it's just pulling one or two people together and just being like, hey, we got to start having different conversations our organization, and I'm thinking about doing this, right? And then I guarantee you, if you start it like that, that other person, there's a couple who are like, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing, Max. Like, I really wish we would have done that. Then bring another couple stakeholders into the mix, right? Be that shining star, be that leader that's bringing people together to collaborate and communicate with one another. And then I'm telling you, eventually, then that's going to get up the chain a little bit, and somebody's gonna be like, "What are you guys talking about over here?" Right? A good business leader would come and say, "I'm curious. I want to know more what you're talking about." Right? And then it starts manifesting itself in the organization. But if I'm a contact center manager, I would look for at least 2 or 3 other stakeholders, people, whatever you want to call them, to bring together, start having the conversation, bring a couple more people in, let's have another conversation, and let it grow, let it fester, because people will follow some of this stuff if you start it, but just got to be brave, and you got to be vulnerable, and you got to trust that it will happen and work.
Yeah, I think a key to that is people want to do a good job. They want to do the right thing. So anybody who's helping enable that should be able to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, Scott, in terms of be brave and be vulnerable. And I think that that's a lot of what change is, right? It's not being afraid to take the risks, because if you're afraid to take the risks, you're not going to be able to push change forward and to really impact your organization like you should. So love that.
I mean, if I'm being really vulnerable with you guys, like, Wesley and I, we were a little scared to go down this road a year ago, right? I mean, it made sense to him and I and whatnot, but we were like, is this going to resonate with others? Are the things that we're talking about confidence through conversation? How do we build a consultative approach in our contact center? How do we build a personalized experience for anybody that's having a conversation with us? How do we do that? And at the end of the day, it started with some conversations, and then it kind of grew, and it's this iterative approach, right? Things start building and going, and I think if you think you're going to go into a room and sit down for an hour or two and have this conversation and think you're going to figure it all out in that first hour or two, you're fooling yourself. But if you start putting the right foundational pieces in place, don't put the cart before the horse, essentially, right? Make sure that you build, do we have the right culture in place? Do we have, and if not, ask yourself the hard questions. Get vulnerable with each other, because you can't say we're going to deliver the best customer service we've ever seen and think it's going to be fantastic if you don't have people that don't believe in great customer service, right? And it's just, those two things never align themselves. And so, make sure though that you have the right foundation in place first. Start there. Foundational elements are key. Culture is key. It's why we're starting this podcast series talking about culture, right? It's because it is the foundation to everything else that, think. You want to get to the cool tech stuff? Great, we can, right? But, we can put the coolest technology in place and do phenomenal digital transformation and whatnot. But if your culture isn't there to support all of that, you're going to fail. And so start there. Start with the culture. Start small. Build it together. Have conversations. Be vulnerable. Ask hard questions. Really self-reflect. Do all these things, and you can get yourself to a good spot at the end of the day.
I think that's really powerful. And you summed that up so well, Scott. Is there anything that you would add, Wes?
I've been a part of like startups and stuff like that. And, a lot of people join a startup because the culture is, oh, well, everyone is motivated. You hear a little bit about the Kool-Aid term, right? Like,
Right.
You're either with everybody or you're not. I think, the other piece is the dynamic. Everybody in an organization is a little bit different. I think, everyone has different experiences that brought them to your organization. When you are acknowledging the uniqueness of your team, I think that also, it could be as simple as, hey, we got someone on our team who perhaps isn't as outspoken as Scott or I, and making sure people feel like that's okay, but they're still a part of the team and they can still, kind of embody the culture. That's really, really critical as well.
Between Scott, what you said, and Wes, what you just said right there, I think we've got a great wrap up for today. This is a great opener. I'm excited to hear how the rest of this conversation goes, and we'll be doing it over the next few weeks. So thanks, guys. Thanks, Joanna, and everybody.
Thank you.
We'll be talking to you very soon.